Board Member Riston. Board Member Daly. Board Member Bynum.
Here.
Board Member Smith.
Here.
Chairperson Connolly.
Here. Next up, Pledge of Allegiance. Join me in Pledge the flag of the nation. Ready? Salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Okay. Regular business.
Okay.
So the board may approve the minutes of July 28th. Any changes, errors, or corrections by any board member or staff to the minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve minutes.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consideration and possible recommendation on a list of projects for which a work plan budget schedule should be developed for future prioritization for possible grant funding. Christina Buck.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. So this is our main topic of discussion this afternoon. We introduced the topic at your last board meeting. We talked a little bit about the SGMA Sustainable Groundwater Management Implementation Grant Program that is coming up, and kind of the anticipated process to evaluate what projects are listed in the groundwater sustainability plan, and then identify which ones we want to pursue for funding at this time. So since you all last met, the Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee met a couple weeks ago, and they had 2 of their 5 appointed members present. So it was a low-key discussion, but a good conversation between those WAC members and staff, kind of talking through each of these projects. So what we wanted to do today is bring forward kind of their input and the outcome of that discussion around which projects we think could move forward into this next phase of just developing more detailed work plan, budget, and schedule, which then, if prioritized and identified by you in the next kind of phase of decision making, would be included in the grant application. So today we're not looking for direction on exactly which projects to put in a grant application. It's kind of the step before that to put some more meat on the bones for some of these projects. And you'll see that a number of the projects listed in the GSP don't currently have, budget estimates. So we need to do a little bit of work to even just be able to bring that type of detail forward to you and first to the WAC. Okay, so this is just a reminder of some of the details around the grant program. DWR is administering this. The final guidelines and proposal solicitation package, which describes the grant application requirements and how things will be evaluated, were released back in December. We now know that they are not going to be revised. We were waiting for how the state budget was going to land, and so that did happen at the end of August. And so there won't be changes there. This has 2 rounds of funding. The first round has already been awarded to the critically overdrafted basins, and we are part of round 2 as a medium priority basin. So we also now know, just as of this morning, that the timing, they anticipate opening the grant application period in early to mid-October with a deadline of November 30th. So all of a sudden we went from a relatively relaxed timeline of getting our act together to pretty quick to get this in before the end of November. But we have to have one application for the subbasin, but there can be multiple projects and multiple implementing agencies. So you'll see that kind of in our discussion today. And then eligible expenses that have already been expended back to when the PSP was released, which was December of 2021, could be reimbursed as part of this grant program. So we can apply for money that's already been spent, potentially. So just a high-level overview of the application evaluation criteria. A lot of it is just points based on your project description, and if your tasks and your work plan walk and talk with your budget and your schedule. And then there's also points for, describing the nexus that the project and the benefits outcome of the project would have with human right to water, underrepresented communities, severely disadvantaged communities, small water systems, and domestic well users. And there's kind of a couple of points assigned for each of those categories, adding up to a total of 13 possible points for kind of all of those categories. And then, 3 points for the budget, 1 point for the schedule, and only full points if there's some sort of local cost share for the project. So, there's partly identifying kind of individual projects and a package of projects, and then there's the piece of putting the application together that walks and talks and kind of tells the story of how these things will help advance and implement the plan and get to sustainability in the subbasin. So, to help us with that, we are almost completing a small contract with Ludorf Scawanini Consulting Engineers to aid in some of this project development of scopes and budget estimates, and to help us compile the application. But today, what we're doing and asking for from the board is to receive, we'll provide you with the WAC input, and that was in your packet, some insight on that. And then looking for direction from you on specifying the list of projects to dedicate more time and effort into developing these more specific work plans and budget and schedules. And then in the future, we'll actually prioritize and decide which projects to apply for. So the WAC, essentially, there's kind of the comprehensive list of projects that is in the packet and was presented at your last meeting. The WAC walked through some of those projects, and this was essentially the outcome. Some input on, at this time, recommending that we scope up an agricultural irrigation efficiency project, and their thoughts on that was to really step back and look at what the potential is for that type of activity in the subbasin, and maybe a component of that is, grower education and outreach for existing funding opportunities, existing programs around that topic. So that's the first one. The second one that was talked about and recommended is actually, there's 2 different projects listed and described in the plan that are pretty similar. That's the FloodMAR project, which is, FloodMAR is Flood Managed Aquifer Recharge. So looking at opportunities to manage flood differently and high water kind of situations differently, to slow it down, spread it out, and for recharge benefits to the basin. And streamflow augmentation has some similarities, so we kind of grouped those together. And that would really be a feasibility type project as well, to just start to look at, what are the opportunities for doing that type of work in the subbasin, and perhaps an opportunity for including a pilot project. The discussion there related to maybe a pilot study or a pilot project for drainage in the Palermo area. And then thirdly, the agricultural surface water supplies project and intra-basin water transfer project. Those are also pretty similar in the plan. And this is really looking at the opportunities to bring surface water supplies to available surface water supplies to agricultural users in the subbasin. We have talked briefly with Raith Mosley from South Feather Water and Power about that. Their district is already in the subbasin. There's some opportunity for expansion of their district boundary and existing infrastructure. And so this project really could be kind of an evaluation of the opportunity there, design, and if we could scope it up enough to do kind of low-hanging fruit implementation. So that's the idea behind that one and what was discussed at the WAC. And then the next 5 are projects that are, so those 3 need some additional scoping, and the consultants would help us do that because there aren't, and in that case, South Feather could also assist with that last one. But the agency that would implement those projects would likely be the GSA. The next 5 projects were submitted by other agencies, so well upgrades and Thermalito Water and Sewer District water treatment plant capacity upgrade. Those are both Thermalito Water and Sewer District projects, and so they would be able to provide kind of the work plan, budget, and schedule for those projects. Water loss monitoring project I believe we would work with South Feather Water and Power on that one. And then Orville Wildlife Area Robinson's Riffle Project is a Sutter, Butte, what's the acronym?
Bufka, Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency.
Great, yeah, thank you. So I haven't had a chance to reach out to them yet and find out kind of what the status of their project would be and what the ask would be. So staff would follow up.
We just received 1.4 million
Okay, oh great.
from the state to do the study. I'll comment when you're done.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we can talk about that one. And then Palermo Clean Water Consolidation Project, as you may know, there's a number of kind of funding applications in the works. I think what we would suggest at this point is kind of keep it on the list as a potential. If we think there's a hole from other funding sources, we could include it in this funding application as well, or not. If we find out between now and then that this project is getting funded, through these other applications that are already kind of in the works, then maybe we don't need to go after this pot of money for that project. So I think this is the total list. This was included in your packet and has the notes there on these different projects. Essentially, the ones that I didn't just walk through are projects that are listed in the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, but discussion with the WAC members and staff there essentially said, that's a potentially a good project. Let's keep it on the GSP list, but right now it's not a good fit either timing wise or funding opportunity wise, or circumstances in the subbasin maybe don't necessitate it. So that's how those kind of fell off the list. And with that, I will I'll just walk through what we think our timeline is, and this is really fresh off the press because we just found out this morning that November 30th is the deadline, so we're going to have to speed things up a little bit. So we'll get consultants working on whatever projects you all give us direction to develop further today. Those will get further developed. We'll schedule a meeting with the WAC, I think in October, to get their input and recommendation then based on that more detailed information on which projects to prioritize for funding. And we'll need to meet with you in early November to get your direction on projects to apply for. And then we'll get that application together by the deadline of November 30th.
Okay.
So that's the plan.
Can you go back to the
Yeah.
list?
Yep. So this is what we want to talk about is these, or I can go to the next table too if you'd rather.
Okay, so not to be in front of it, but the agriculture irrigation efficiency, I think we should develop rules and regulations concerning that, because there's going to be more and more orchards and pressure put on our groundwater. I see it growing out towards you. And I think it would be a minimum that we would put on it. You can't flood irrigate, just some sort of minimum so that they don't come in just wasting the water. What do you guys think about that? I mean, in other words, use modern technology when you irrigate.
No, I agree with that.
And then on the stream flow augmentation, there's a real need for it because Highway 70 floods down by Grover Lane. And I don't know, the problem I see with that is there's a lot of private landowners, but we could put very shallow detention basins that are very temporary that would stop the flooding, and then they would also all up and down Wyman's Ravine that would cause recharge. I mean, but that's like a 50,000 foot view, because I don't know how you get around the private ownership of the land allowing us to do it, And then agricultural surface water supplies, there is a need for that out towards Bangor, for example. We have wineries out there that are scrambling for water. Of course, Hickman's brings it up all the time on South Feather, but wouldn't that be something that South Feather would be mostly in charge of, and we would just help look for a grant to help them or something? We wouldn't want to carry the ball on that, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And so this grant could fund them to kind of evaluate what the opportunities are there to expand their surface water deliveries.
Then well upgrades, are we talking ag, or are we talking local, people's domestic wells, or what?
That's a Thermalito Water and Sewer District project, so they are looking to upgrade their wells. I don't know if
Okay.
we could look at the plan and
Wouldn't
look at
you
the
just
details
charge your
again.
customers more and upgrade your well? Just speaking out loud. I'm just asking.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that Thermalito, we've had several discussions about, is our current rates going to carry us forward and give us enough capital funds to even come close to doing our capital projects.
That's what's wrong with the sewer plants in Orville. They never did it, and now it's way behind, and now we're trying to catch up. But I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to help or anything. I'm just trying to be blunt that you've got to charge enough that you got a sinking fund for your improvements as you go. And if you don't, we could upgrade the well, and if you're still charging the same amount, I mean, we got to have a meeting of the minds on that. With me, I'm only one board member, but you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, and you know, you mentioned about looking ahead. I can tell you this, that Thermalito has not raised their rates for over 12 years.
There you go.
It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Worston, that they are starting to their a kind of a fee impact study and changing their rates. And I also think with regard to their wells, they predominantly use surface water supplies, but they've had to use their wells in the instances of fire and floods because of solids. And so I think if they can fund it themselves, that's great. But in the event that they can't, you know, being able to, but their fee study probably won't be done for another, or their rate increase study won't be done for another year if they, because they have to do the Prop 218.
Don't tell my sister, brother-in-law, mom, or dad that I'm talking about raising their water rates. I'll have trouble. They all live
We'll
out
keep
there.
it between all of us, right? And who's ever online.
Yeah, well, it's just in the infant stages right now, but you're right, there is, we've been looking at a couple of companies to go with to do a study for us, so.
Water loss monitoring, that means they're gonna go out and gunite more canals? Is that what they're
So
talking
no, that
about?
one's specific to the issue of water theft off of hydrants. So it's more
okay.
like infrastructure to put, you know, locks on hydrants and kind of save water that way.
Okay, in the Orville Wildlife Area, Robinson's Riffle is Wade Crowfoot told them we need to do this, and like, we got a call like 3 or 4 days later from the meeting we were in, which was the advisory, the Orville Dam Advisory, Safety Advisory Board. And we did receive enough money to do the planning and stuff, but it's a natural, it's on the east side of the river. There's a hairpin turn, which is called Robinson's Riffle, and that causes it to back up towards town. And it also, there's a big area in the mapping, I don't want to get off track, but by lowering the levee, we can actually recharge all out in the wildlife area, plus allow the salmonoids to grow as babies into bigger fish. And it's something that's desired to protect Orville from flooding, it's desired for environmental reasons, and it could also create more recreational opportunities. It's not a real complicated job once you do it, but getting the money's been really tough. So I don't know how we fit. Do we fit because it would be a recharge?
Yeah, I think so, as a multi-benefit.
And it
Kind
is
of
all
recharge
cobble, so
project.
you know it's going to recharge. I mean,
Yeah.
And then the last one, the Palermo Clean Water calls, you guys are in charge of that, basically. You know if we need the money or not. That's moving forward. But Palermo also has another problem. They have a huge drainage problem. They've never had a fully engineered drainage plan, and they tend to flood. And there's a lack of maintenance due to Fish and Wildlife's current rulings on entering these streams. Maybe there's some potential to build retention basins, or I don't know, something to help with that and cause recharge at the same time. But it's really iffy again because it's all private. That's a tough one for me. No, those are my thoughts. You guys' turn. Want to go to Salmon Festival?
I'm
Do you
there.
have enough direction?
Well, so does this look good? I mean, our direction would be to go ahead and scope up these projects. and then we'll bring them back, with more detail, and then you can decide.
Yeah, I think you gotta go to the WAC and say, hey, look, they're thinking about making sure you can't just flood irrigate. I mean, not rice land, but,
Other things.
orchards in particular. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, with that first one, that sounds to me like basically potentially developing an ordinance, that the GSA would
That's what I
have
think
to.
we should do.
Yeah. So that,
So we're not behind the curve. Oh, we got 4 guys putting in 1,000 acres each, and now the groundwater's falling like crazy because they're just wasting water. I don't want to be there. I want to be in front of it.
yeah.
We want to be in front of it. I see a bunch of head nods, You guys are allowed to talk,
You're doing a great job.
You know what I always heard from Lambert? Be quiet and look smart. He'd be buying cows and
Well,
everybody's smart.
Agriculture irrigation efficiency, most of our agriculture is west of town, correct?
No, it's starting actually, well, yeah, it's this side of 70 now, heading towards, even towards Bangor. They're starting to put in orchards and vineyards.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And right out by his house, there's quite a few big orchards that have just gone in. They're coming up from Yuba, Sutter County.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you go out there and, just, is that railroad, what's that? Lone Tree.
Lone Tree Road, yeah, and there are a lot of new orchards within the last 5 years
Right.
out there.
That's the concern.
So I do think there needs to be an ordinance.
Yeah. What else?
Is the olive plant still out there?
Oh, way down, yeah. The bush olives and all that.
Yeah.
They're there.
I think some of that would also depend on where they're drawing the water. If there's surface and they're drawing it, it can actually have a recharge potential
Yeah,
with
but
agriculture.
I don't think there's a bit of surface out there.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that could be part of, a consideration when you think about,
South Feather or
South
those
Feather
retention
expanding.
basins
yeah,
are kind of a recharge too for them.
yeah.
Yeah, because you're right, there's not a lot of surface water in that lower, south of Palermo area.
Uncut Creek.
Well,
But an
Honeycutt
ordinance
Creek,
could
yeah,
also
there's
address
Honeycutt
that.
Creek,
It
yeah.
almost dries up too now.
An ordinance could address that as well, depending on where that water is drawn from, as to how you can irrigate. And get into the weeds on that.
For new wells, agricultural wells, do they go to the county? Is that a state issue?
No, they go to the county for a permit. They're ag wells if they're over 6 inches?
8 inches, yeah.
Inches?
Yeah, so one of the projects on the total list is a well permitting ordinance, and the idea, that would be a Butte County Environmental Health project. They're already considering, updating pieces of the ordinance. They've been waiting on state guidelines on well construction. That's been delayed, I guess. But this would potentially, seek grant funding to do some studies to better understand tying that effort into, Sigma interests and interests that are described in the groundwater sustainability plan. What was discussed by the WAC was essentially, not to pursue funding for that through this effort, but to kind of track it and be involved, but not take a lead on it. But if you have different input, we can certainly kind of bring more detail related to that project back for future consideration.
I guess, they already have an ordinance, they can only be so close to each other if it's large diameter. They already have regulations on sealing wells and all of that. Do we need to do anything? Or just wait?
I think the thought is, certainly other subbasins around that don't have some of those things in place already, like the well spacing ordinance, have naturally started thinking about, do we need to think about screening intervals and guiding, whether ag wells maybe go deeper and shallow wells are shallower, or domestic wells are shallower. I think there's, potential to revisit some of those things in our ordinance and what data and information we have to base thresholds on. But that's, as you know, a whole can of worms.
I think the main thing I would like to do if we were going to pursue funding for the wells is give somebody a huge break if they let us make it into a test well. Maybe we could back fund their permitting, you know, so that so the health department isn't out of money, but yet they get a break and we get the benefit of a test well and more science.
Yeah. And what's not on this list that we're talking about, because it's kind of what we would consider a given, is enhancing the monitoring network. So we'll certainly bring forward, a proposal essentially to add new monitoring wells to the subbasin.
Just to add that a little bit, we did on the acknowledgement form, I think for the current applications, it had a place for someone to indicate if they were interested in being part of the monitoring network. And then I think as part of that, we would look at where that well was located to see if it is in an area that we do need additional monitoring, and would approach them if that was the case.
And then if we had the money to incentivize it.
Right.
Yeah, because the more science, well, everybody knows, the more science you got, the better it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go. Anybody else got any input?
Well, you mentioned the test well. What would be our justification for the test well?
Well, because we have a gap in the science. We don't know exactly what's going on in that area. So we would help fund their permit so that they would allow us to, their ag well to become
okay.
a test well.
Okay.
So we could more complete the science and the modeling.
Right, bring us up to 2022, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. And really, if we really get a good picture at it, then we can really manage it and hopefully without harming anybody and moving forward, you know?
Right. Okay, I'm, like I said,
That's a great question, huh?
yeah, I wasn't questioning what your desire was, or, I just was curious if we could justify it.
Yeah.
But the way you worded that, I think we could, absolutely, because it would make us a better manager of, sorry about that, a better manager of the water. If we had a test well and we knew what we were capable of and that type of thing.
Any other questions or comments? Do you have enough direction to, kind of foggy, but,
I think so. Yeah, we'll bring.
We're an easy group. We're not
I know,
those
it's so
people in
nice.
Chico.
So unless you want to
We're
add,
billions.
unless you want to add anything to this list, this is what we'll bring back more information
No, I
on.
think this is a handful.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
Yeah. All right. Any electronic public comment?
Mr. Chairperson, I have not received any public comment for this meeting.
Anyone from the public like to speak? We cannot take action on it. It is not agendized. So, we'll adjourn this meeting. We'll see you next month.
All right.
And you can go to Salmon Festival.
There we go.
That was harmless, right? It wasn't too bad.
We still had another item.
Oh, what is it?
One quick update item.
Just an update item,
Oh, I'm sorry. Update me.
unadjourned.
Oh, management team updates,
I'm sorry.
RFP.
I'm worried about a Salmon Festival.
Is
Yeah,
it?
no, we're good.
I don't
okay.
want them to run out. That's why
Okay.
I am in charge.
I'll make it really quick. You can time me. So just as a reminder, this is for the request for proposals that are out. So as you may recall, the Board of Supervisors provided the Department of Water and Resource Conservation, our department, with some one-time financing and funding to administer 3 primary tasks, one being the Sigma grant application that Christina covered today, and 2 other tasks, the annual reports and long-term funding and financing for the GSAs. And so we have issued 2 requests for proposals, one for annual reports and one for long-term financing. The annual report RFP, request for proposal, was sent out in beginning of September 6th, and the final proposals are due on September 30th, and then we anticipate doing a review of those proposals and selecting a consultant. And the representatives from each GSA on the management committee will be reviewing those. The proposals, the way the RFP is written, and this is true for both, that one consultant could be selected to prepare all 3 annual reports for each subbasin, meaning Vienna, Wyandotte, and Butte subbasins, or each subbasin could have their own consultant. So there is potentially a cost savings, so we've asked what that cost savings would be if those consultants would cover all 3 subbasins. So, and then we plan on, the contract would be with the county, so we'll bring that to the Board of Supervisors in November. For the long-term funding proposal, it's a slightly different process. We submitted the solicitation was published at the beginning of September, September 1st, and the proposals are due October 7th. And then we anticipate having the ad hoc committee that from this group reviewing those proposals along with members from the management committee, and again, with that solicitation, there could be one consultant that would prepare long-term funding and fee studies for both Wyandotte and Vina, or it could be separate consultants. We do anticipate bringing the selected consultant who we've identified back to this board just for your review and kind of concurrence before we take it to the Board of Supervisors for a contract. We thought with the long-term funding, you might want to have a little more of kind of a say in that process, and since it is a highly probably controversial or public process. So,
I mean, do you think this room will be full when you tell them we're going to tax it oil or something?
but we
Or surpass
anticipate
anything.
that contract going to the Board of Supervisors in December. And then the timeline for even that process, we've anticipated if there is some kind of tax or assessment, that it would be on the assessor's roll in August, so that there would be money available to the GSA in January of 2024. So so that's the process with both of those RFPs. So that will be brought back to you at your November meeting. Questions?
Could you call the governor up and tell him I want some of that budget surplus put into these, so we don't,
I'll call him
let him know.
on my way out to the car.
All right. Any questions? Thank you. Now can we go? All right, thank you. I'm sorry.
4 minutes.
You did good. You all did good.
That was the one we didn't want to hear.
Yeah.
That's why he was trying to get out of here.
Yeah, we're gonna, that's when the rubber hits the road. I said that the whole time, and everybody knows it. It's an unfunded mandate again. I'm gonna go buy a new belt. I hate this one.
All right.
Well, let's